Hey y'all, I'm Carolina Tony. Today the road brings me to Columbia, South Carolina, and we are here at the Mill Village.
Olympia Mill Village Museum.
Olympia Mill Village Museum. And I'm here with my new friend Sherry, and she is going to show us and tell us what it was like to be a part of the Mill Village. And we'll get started right after this station identification.
To Columbia between 1895 and 1900, he built 4 textile mills in this area. Mm-hmm. The first one he built was this one right here, the Grammy Mill. Mm-hmm. And he was, of course, building the mill villages that go along with them. The second one he built was, if you're familiar with Columbia, at the bottom of Main Street there, it's now apartments. It's called the Loft Apartments. Mm-hmm. The third one he built was across Assembly Street, Capital City Mill. Mm-hmm. But his fourth one was the Olympia Mill. And this really was his masterpiece. And I see you looking at the differences between those two. If you think about it, the Olympia Mill was so ornate, and it had all these beautiful tiles on it, and they are still there. Right. That's still intact. You had the cupolas and everything. When Olympia Mill came online in 1900, it was the largest cotton mill in the world under one roof. Wow. It took 1,200 workers to run just this one mill. Mm. So while Whaley was doing that, he was also building 350 mill houses that would be used to house the workers. And the unique thing about the Olympia Mill Village is there are 5 architectural styles. Mm-hmm. The third thing that was going on is he was sending people out into the rural areas of South Carolina to entice them to come to the Mill Village to work. This is a full-page ad. In 1901, it was on the front page of every county newspaper. And this whole article extols the virtues of the Olympia Mill Village, and it talks about all the perks and things. People who were coming, of course, were uneducated, mostly farm background people. My mother's family came here in the mid-1920s, and they were on a sharecropping farm in Orangeburg, and she said we were about to starve to death. So the opportunities for these folks to come into an area and be able to have a nice job, live in a nice house, it was a real life-altering challenge for them. And of course, if you've got people living on a farm, you've got 7 or 8 children. Children are helping run the farm, right? So there's not a big stretch to come to the mill village in those early days, and the children work in the mills. Mm-hmm. And every family had children 7, 8, and 9 years old working in the mills. Mm-hmm. And that was an interesting thing, because people in town, they were concerned about this huge influx of these uneducated mill workers. You know, they were rough around the edges and everything. And so they started talking to Whaley and saying, you know, you really need to start a school. Those children don't need to be, you know, in the mills. It's dangerous. They need an education. Plus, we'd rather they didn't go to school with our children up here. We want you to have your own school. We got this young teacher, Mamie Boozer, to go around to each house and see if they would send their children to school. And of course, it was a big sacrifice for the families, because the children were part of the family economy. But they were able to get about 30 students. So right here in 1901, Miss Mamie Boozer started the first Olympia Mill School right here in this space. There were only 30 students, and this is about 120 students. Wow. And if you look at what we've got here, Miss Boozer wrote an article for the state newspaper, and that's where we have these photographs that we've blown.
How cool.
This is my granddaddy right here. This is Major Hall. Uh-huh. He went to school in this space. Really? He did not like school. He stayed 3 days. He jumped out the window and went home and said, Mama, put me to work in the mill. So Major, along with his brother Clyde, they shared a job, and that's what they did. The children would take turns running a job. And Major told me that he carried a wooden box around that he would have to step up on to reach into the machinery to get the cotton dust out. That was the children's job. And they also did the sweeping and tidying up. 1920, and that's what this room represents, Olympia was the mill village to live in if you were a textile worker. And part of the reason was they had this wonderful community center. It's now called is 701, but it was across the street. A bowling alley. They had dances for kids on Friday night. They had movies for a nickel. They had craft classes. This was the center, the cultural and / social hub of the Mill Village by the 1920s. Sample here of, this is what the village looked like we were talking about, the houses coming. Elders in the community told us that the houses were well kept. They had screens on them. If a window broke out, they would be there to repair it. If anything went wrong, they wanted to be sure that everything was tip-top. So it really was a good place by that time. Of course, the downside is you had to work really, really hard, and you had to stay in good stand with the boss, whatever.
Right.
One saying was, if you get drunk on Saturday night, you have to move Monday morning. So, of course, I'm sure there was a lot of imbibing going on, but that was kind of part of the thing. It did kind of help people in check, but they were learning to live in a community. The families would not have had a living room suit. They would, because the families were multi-generational, there were beds in every room besides the kitchen. And what would happen is...
So that's a sofa bed?
That one is, but it would not have been here in those early 1900s. That's a little more 1930s or 1920s. But the point is that of course, I grew up in a 3-room house, mill house, and when you open the front door, that was my parents' bedroom. And then we had the children's bedroom and we had the kitchen. So that was really, and what happened is one couple might come here with their children and work, and they say, hey, brother, this is good. Why don't you come and stay with us a while and work? Let's get mom and dad off the farm and all. So it was this gradual migration of people off the farm and coming into these homes, and that's why they were filled with beds, because you had so many people, that were living in each house. The kitchen area, and this was represented by the 1930s. And in this space, you got your second and third generation of mill workers, and they are saying to their children, this is okay for me, but you are never to work in the mills. You need to get an education. You need to get a trade. You need to find something else to do, because the work was so grueling, just like you were referring to earlier. This is the same place, too, that they would have started the conversation about unionizing the mills. In the mid-1920s, they started talking about, striking for better working conditions. It took them 10 or 12 years to do that. But by 1938 is when they actually unionized the mills here in Columbia.
Oh.
And that was another huge cultural shift. People to think the union is going to protect you. It's right here. Look how strong it is. Pay your union dues. Join up with us. Right across from there. So the union was a huge, once again, a cultural shift. It represents another huge cultural shift. This is the 1940s. And one of the main reasons is when they sold all the houses, people had to negotiate new rents with the new owners, which certainly were higher. But you could buy your home if you could scrape together $250.
So basically, in retaliation for the unions coming into the plant, the mill owners sold the homes to developers.
Yes.
And then, of course, then you could buy the house.
If you would negotiate with the new owner.
Right.
Yeah. And a lot of people were able to buy the homes. But a lot of people, they just had to renegotiate, you know, what the new rents would be.
So 3-room house for $250, 45 down and $3 a week.
And let me tell you too, this was in 1938. My family bought their house in 1942, just a few years later. They paid $600 for it. So it appreciated the value very, very quickly. And what is happening today in the Mill Village is out of all those 350 houses, only 20% are owner occupied. 80% of them are rentals to students, and they rent by the bedroom. $700 per bedroom. So a house like this, down right 3 blocks from here, rents for $2,800 a month with the 4 bedrooms. So again, there was opportunity. There were opportunities for the workers. They could buy their houses. There was opportunity for investors who could buy the houses and then make more money on them. So this kind of represents this whole idea where the mill workers, they're out from under that patriarchal system, and they're having to really kind of be on their own more. You know, and of course every family has. So
you have this clothing here. You've got stories behind it.
Well, there's a story here. I don't.
So like this belonged to a baby that died at about 2 years old, and the lady that had this dress,
Granny Jacob.
Yeah, and she patched the back of it.
Yeah, right.
And she died at 100 and what?
101 and a half in 1992.
Wow.
So. And their family, and I don't know, they ran right across from the fairgrounds. They had a little store. It was called Jayco's Corner. And that was what they started out with, a little stand that you would put the thing up, and they would sell Cokes and cakes. And then later on they put goods in there, and then later on it became a bar in the 30s, and then my husband ran it. He was the 3rd generation, and then they finally sold that property in 2017 after 105 years. This photograph is of Jayco's Corner. It is the longest running business in the Olympia Mill Village. Thomas Harris Jayco came to work at the Olympia Mill in 1908, and his wife Bertie, she followed the next year to create Jayco's Corner in 1912 at the end of the Mill Village on the corner of Bluff Road and Rosewood Drive. It was on this spot where it's now known as Jay's Corner Restaurant and Bar. It's where Jayco's Corner was. Period. I guess you know that they sometimes made children's clothing from feed sacks. Yeah. That's a good example. Granny Jayco made this too for her babies, but I noticed how she must have made it for a bigger child, and then she took it up so so we can get more wear out of it. It's been worn to death.
Wear it out.
Yeah. This is kind of interesting too. That you know, of course, ladies all did the quilting, but I didn't know until some quilting ladies came. They said, "Oh, all of these come from feed sacks." And I, as a little girl, there was a neighbor who had chickens, and my mother would take her to the store, and I got to go and pick out so she could buy feed for her chickens. So I would get to pick out the ones, because Mother was going to make my shorts and little play clothes out of these different fabrics. So I didn't even realize that till these ladies explained that these were feed sacks. But all of this is hand stitched, every one of them. This is a school building. At one time, over 200 children went to school here, though not at the same time, in different shifts during the day. After this school was shut down, after this brief period, the school next door was open, and it has been open ever since. From the 1890s through the 1930s, there was a citywide electric trolley. It was powered by energy produced at Olympia Mill. By 1903, it ran down the center of Olympia Avenue, right past this museum, all the way to the main gate where the state fairgrounds are today. This is one of the original trolley rails that it was in the yard for about 50 or 60 years, and then Jake brought it in the bar, and it was a foot rail there. And one family, the Strickland family, their dad was a conductor there up until about 1938, and for some reason or other, with the trolley bell, and they moved it from house to house for 70 years, and he finally brought it here. He said it's been under the all of our houses for 70 years, so now we have
it's held up real well.
Yeah,
I have discovered you have to have a key to get in, but I found someone who could help, and no, it wasn't the Wizard of Oz. Okay, well, we have gained access to some of the Olympia Mill buildings. Well, that is going to do it for our trip to the Olympia Mill Village and Mill Village Museum. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give me a big old thumbs up. Be sure to share it with your family and friends. But until next time, y'all have a good day.